Madison, will you come tell us about your granddad?
Dennis O'Donnell is my grandpa, and he is a baker. I think he's the best baker in the world, even if he disagrees with me. In the 1970s, after serving in the United States Air Force, he worked at a juvenile corrections center. And their baker was planning on retiring, so they were looking for someone to train up to be his replacement. Dennis thought, why not? And he learned that this man made everything from scratch. He had recipes upon recipes, tricks of the trade, and so much general knowledge that my grandpa had to learn before he could call himself a baker. He spent years learning and baking there with this guy as his mentor. Then him and my grandma, Christy O'Donnell, started having the wild thought to buy a bakery in Ellsworth, Wisconsin. It was a little rundown and the food wasn't great, but Dennis thought they could make it something. They could bring it back to life and make it kind of a central point of the community. They prayed and they made sure that it was right for them and actually feasible before diving in and opening the Bread Box Bakery. It was good, simple baking done right. There was bread and donuts and sugar cookies and so much more. Grandpa got more hands to help, including my mom, who's the oldest of her siblings, and the younger ones too, who might not have been as helpful when they were younger, but learned to bake and learned how to pitch in when they needed to. As long as they got the scrap and, messed up sugar cookies at the end of the day. They filled a role in the community, and folks loved it. And my grandpa says that it was great fun, even if it was exhausting. He was up early in the morning. And when you have, eventually when you have 7 kids, that is quite the feat for both him and my grandma to undertake. There were long afternoons and tiring nights. The dough needed to be prepped, the cookie dough chilled, the fruits jammed and jellied, and an endless list of responsibilities. All of it needed to be ready by the small hours of the morning to catch folks on their way to work, and in the holiday seasons, pies and cookies were in high demand. You could get a pretty penny for a pumpkin pie around Thanksgiving and a dozen cut-out hand-frosted sugar cookies around Christmas time. My mom and her brothers ate their fair share of failed cookies and other goods that didn't quite make the cut for the display box. After all, that's another reason to make a baker's dozen. At some point in the late 80s, 2 of their children were diagnosed with diabetes. While Dennis and Christy loved their bakery, they needed to take care of their family. So they stepped away from Ellsworth and moved to Rapid City, South Dakota, where Dennis found work as a bakery manager. So fast forward several more decades, and I finally come into the picture. As a child in the early 2000s, I remember wanting Grandpa to make my birthday cakes. No one else would do. I don't care where he worked. At one point, he worked at Sam's Club and H-E-B, which is like the Texas version of Hy-Vee. I can't lie, it's better. No store does more than my H-E-B. But I remember no matter where he was, even when he wasn't working at a bakery, I wanted him to make my birthday cakes. Vanilla cake, vanilla frosting, and if he worked at a place that had one of those fancy things that could print the picture on it, whatever book series I was invested in at the time. I remember Grandma made the best pie crust. And I remember making melting moment bars, snickerdoodles, butter strip crackers, butter cake, and so much more every time I visited them. There was always something delicious waiting for my parents when they came to pick me and my sister up from Grandma and Grandpa's, if we managed to save some for them. Finally, when I started getting older, I got more interested in bread. Specifically. There were other more complicated baking endeavors, but especially during the pandemic, I got obsessed with the Great British Bake Off, and I remembered all of these recipes that I had from Grandma and Grandpa, and I went, well, I have all this time on my hands. Why not bake? And so that's what I did. It started out, though, some of the recipes did not turn out right, and so they were underproofed or they were a little claggy. They were just close, but not how Grandpa would make them. So eventually I said, okay, I have to ask him. I have to learn from him. So we baked. And he told me that, you have the amount of yeast that's in the recipe, but you should always use more. And, oh, well, your water's a little too hot. You should test it with your pinky. And, if you feel it just right, or if you can feel it on the outside of the glass, that's too hot. That's too hot, and you start over. And then if you preheat the oven while your bread is rising, it gives the room a little more heat, and it brings the bread up just right. Kneading takes elbow grease. You can't be wimpy about it. It's your workout for the day. So work out. Get that bread just right. And if you're not speckled in flour and crumbs, and if your hands don't look like the Hulk when you pull them out of the dough, you're doing something wrong. With his knowledge, I started making better bread. It was delicious and fluffy, and I wanted to share it with everyone, especially him. I still make bread quite frequently, if you can't tell. Whenever I visit my family for the holidays, I'm the resident roll maker, which is weird because when I was little, that was Grandpa. And at a certain point, I asked him, I was like, why don't you make the rolls? And he went, because you make better rolls than I do. And I have to disagree because his rolls will always be the best, even if he thinks mine are. But now I'm sharing the tricks of the trade, like I mentioned earlier, with my boyfriend and my other friends who I've baked with. But every time I bake, I think of my grandma and grandpa. While my grandma passed away earlier this year, I continue to bake her recipes and feel connected to her. Every time I sink my hands into a bowl of pie crust or roll out some sugar cookie dough, I remember her and I smile. I know that her recipes and her food will nourish me throughout my life, and I'll pass them on with my friends and whatever other family I have in my life. So she will continue to nourish so many more people and brighten their lives. And every time I make a loaf of bread, I think of my grandpa. I think of opening a bakery, and I think of how my grandpa called me crazy, but he said, it's okay to be crazy. It's fun. And I think of him covered in flour, teaching me how to make something. I think of sitting down with a slice of bread or cake or anything and putting our feet up after baking for hours and relishing in the joy of what it is to have made something and to eat it with someone you love. And I think about the transition from the holidays of him being the bread maker to me, and how I'll pass that on to someone else one day. And if I lived closer to my grandpa, I'd bring him something delicious every week, and we'd put our feet up and indulge together. Thank you.
In the wheel of the year, there are 8 points on the wheel of the year. Many of you know this. There's the winter solstice and the summer solstice. When the days are the shortest and the nights are the longest, the nights are the shortest and the days are the longest. Summer solstice, winter solstice. There are the equinoxes, when the fall equinox and the spring equinox, when the daylight and dark are the same, equal equinox. And then there are the cross-quarter days, the days that fall directly halfway in between the solstices and the equinoxes, right? Can you see the 8-pointed wheel? Right. We're at, what did I say? This one right here. If this is fall and this is winter, we're at this one right here, known as Lammas, which was a contraction of the loaf mass, as the old, the church, capital C church, co-opted pagan rituals, and it was the wheat harvest. That's why we're talking about bread, Lammas. And they consecrated the wafers for the year because the wheat harvest had come in. This is the first of the 3 harvest festivals, also known as Lughnasa for the god Lu. And there's a whole drama about the corn god dies and the whoever's rising, and I can never get I can never get the god and goddess psychodrama quite straight. I remember that it's the bread harvest, right? So the corn here in Iowa, here at the 42nd latitude, 42 degrees, the corn is still out in the fields. But boy, you can get some good sweet corn on the side of the road, right? And are you getting good tomatoes out of your garden yet? What else is coming in your garden? What are you getting? Beans. I heard weeds. Cucumbers. Who's got zucchini? How much zucchini you got? Lots. All that work that you put in early in the year, all that work that you put in and watered when there wasn't enough water and maybe covered it over when there was too much water, all that weeding that you did, the work brings the harvest. And that's why we celebrate with bread this harvest, but we're celebrating all of the other things. There will be even more harvest to celebrate at the fall equinox. And then the last of the harvest festivals is Samhain, we know as Halloween. And that's sort of cornucopia time, but the veil is thin and we're moving into darkness, into winter. So I love that in the wheel of the year, all of these 8 points, 3 are dedicated to abundance and harvest. Well, why do we think that is? Because the ancients depended on the harvest, a good harvest, to live through the rest of the year. They were agrarian people, and I think one of the reasons it feels so important to me in my sophisticated life where I can go and buy whatever I want, and I am with you about HEB. I am with you. Hy-Vee's good, Fairway, all right. We can get what we want wherever and pretty much whenever we want it. I don't have to be tied to the seasons other than the light that's coming in my window or not, or how much bundling I need to do or not. My life doesn't so much depend on the cycle of the seasons because I'm warm and have a home. But these celebrations, turning to face the directions, reminds me that I am connected in mystery and miracle to this land, this place, these people, and the people whose names I will never know, generations past, and the people whose names I will never know, generations forward. That's why we celebrate Lammas. And what we're going to do after the service is over is that we're going to take this basket of bread and we're going to eat it. Some of it's sliced. People who are civilized can have a slice of bread. We got some butter and some jam. The rest of us are just going to tear into it. Let's see how we do that. Our dear Dr. Sue clued me into a story about llamas that came from the 1940s, from 1940, off the southern coast of England. This is during the war, and the Nazis have conquered France. France has fallen, several other places have fallen. And a coven of witches gather in an island off the south coast of England where the Nazis, the Germans, would naturally come to invade England. And they built a cone of power. A cone of power is a coven of witches who gather and they set an intention and they chant and they build power together, the power of connection with each other, of sound, of emotion. They build it up. Some people say that the witch's hat, the black pointed witch's hat, is a representation of the cone of power. So these witches could be an apocryphal story. We don't know if it really happened or not, but it's a great tale. And I encourage you to read Dr. Sue's Substack, which she talks about this event, whether or not it happened. But what she says is that we don't know if it ever took place, but it's important in what it can teach us, what this story can teach us. One of the first laws of witchcraft is do no harm, right? So they were not trying to curse or put a hex on Hitler. They weren't trying to cause his death or something bad to him. Pay attention to this. If you feel like you want to put a curse or a hex on someone, pay attention. That's not the message. It's do no harm. It's come together, and their chant was, you cannot come here. Do not attempt to sail here. You cannot come. Don't come here. Do not come here. Coincidentally, perhaps, the Germans never tried to invade England by sea from the south coast. Did the witch's cone of power do that? We don't know. We don't know. Probably didn't hurt. And whether or not it mattered past their cone, it mattered to them. They loved their country, and they did what they could. They came together, they took the time, they did the planning and took the time to come together and create something as a community that they could not create alone. We have the opportunity to do exactly this. We have the opportunity to take the time to come together to create some power and work with each other to do something that we cannot do alone. August the 30th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon is the 30th anniversary of Amos, a mid-Iowa organizing strategy. 1,000 of us are going to be in the room together, creating power, coming together, saying we stand for something that we cannot do alone. And we don't know. It is mystery how it will turn out, what we will create together. But we won't create anything if we don't show up. If we don't show up and say, we stand for, together, we are willing to work toward, we are going to let it rise, to work toward clean in our state, in our area, with our elected officials, clean water, public education, care for vulnerable seniors, care for immigrants, and emergency medical services. They may not affect me directly. I got good emergency medical services in Ames. If I call the ambulance, it's going to come pretty quick. Will I show up for people for whom that is not true? My water's pretty good. I learned before I came here that we had good water in Ames. Will I show up for people in this state who need help, who need support in getting good water in their areas? Will I show up to build that cone of power of 1,000 people saying, you know what, this is important to us. All we're asking is the time to show up for this. All right, so you knew I was going to get to the commercial for it. 15 of us are signed up for it. 15 of us are signed up for it. We committed from the UU Fellowship that we'd bring 65 people. All right? So we need more of us. We're going to carpool. We're going to have a big old time. We're going to talk about, do we need to get shirts? Together we'll figure all that out. It's going to be a big time, and it's going to matter to us that we were a part of it. So starting next Sunday, we think, we're going to have a table out here before and after service to help sign people up to go. Jerry, if you and Brita both are going, each of you needs to sign up, right? You can't sign up just for one of you. Each of you needs to sign up, right? That's how we get our number. And so we'll have that sign up link. Susan writes that what those witches in the forest did in the darkest hours of history, and some of us believe that this is one of the darkest hours in our history. What they did, or were rumored to have done, was to understand that we are more powerful together than we are alone, that even in the midst of bombs dropping, amid terror and uncertainty and people being disappeared and ridiculous wars, that we can choose to join together across space and difference to dedicate ourselves to each other and to the world we want to live in. Thank you for your beautiful message and for cluing me into this. This is what we get when we plant together, when we tend together, when we have patience to rise together. May it be so.